writer uses words to construct, particularly a poet, in the same way a constructor uses bricks and broken bricks to build a house. Technically, what a writer uses is what we call words or morphemes, or independent morphemes or bound morphemes. And these correspond exactly to the bricks, which are words. And then the broken bricks, I call them bound bricks, because they cannot stand by themselves. And this is exactly what a writer does. And another type of writer takes that construction and dissect it to tell you what exactly has happened in the process of construction and what meanings are derived at when certain elements are chosen to put together. And then you who read, you take that book, you take that article, you read it and decipher what the author was driving at. Sometimes the readers see more largely than even the author himself or herself. And that's the interesting thing about writing. But I'm not going to go further into that. I don't want to eat into my time because I have a particular subject that I have been assigned to talk about. And that is the relevance of culture in African education and the need for a curriculum to reflect African cultures, African values, African history, and above all, African languages. You see, when I come to fora like this, I feel very funny to myself. And I wonder whether we are thinking seriously about ourselves on this continent. Africa has over 2,000 languages and dialects. And there are 54 countries on the continent. Each country has as many languages as you can imagine. Gambia, small as it is, officially today they recognize 7 languages. But the question we should ask ourselves, what makes a human person different from another human person? Or what makes a people different from other people? I think we on this continent don't ask this question, this fundamental question. And we celebrate every year that we are independent. That is not true. That is not true at all. How independent are we if we have around our necks a linguistic chain which is marring our progress in whatever we do? Because language is what makes you different from other people. And language is rooted in culture. The culture, the history, the values are all kept in a big box. And that big box is what I'm calling language. Now Gambia is like next year will be 60 years so-called independent. And the first generation of politicians never posed the fundamental question, without which we can never be liberated. I find it funny that we are here talking to each other in English, as if we don't have any language. For 60 years after independence, those who came here to colonize us knew very well that to make somebody inferior. To make somebody feel inferior is to dominate him or her culturally. And the first thing to do with such a person is to seize or stop him or her using her tongue. And you give him or her another tongue. When I say tongue, I mean language. And that's exactly what the colonizer did. To make somebody serve you, do what you want and not what he or she wants. To stop somebody being proud of himself or herself or his or her being, you have to subject him or her to your will. And the best way to do that is that person to make him or her disregard the fundamental basis of his or her being, and that is language and culture. You know, we complain that colonialists came here, they took our resources away and all that. For me, yes, but that for me is not important. What is important, they came here to destroy us. They came here to stop us being ourselves. They came here to stop us using the fundamental weapon without which we can never make progress in life in this world. And that is our language, and that is our culture, and that is every value that we work for. So you go to our schools, preschool, children at 3, 8, 3. They are made to learn English. And English is rooted in a culture. And to be able to learn any language very well, and I emphasize that, to learn any language very well, you must know the culture of that language. And that is why those who were born in England and they go to school there, when they come here, they speak English exactly like the English people. They speak English better than you. Even if you speak it well, the only minor thing would be your accent. Everything will be different. Will be marked by your language itself. So one of the fundamental reasons why there is still delay in development on the African continent is the fact that we have been using languages which are not helpful to make us fall ahead. Take this small country as example. Over 80% of the population are totally ignorant of the language that is being used to serve them. I emphasize, 80% of the population, more than that, are totally ignorant of the language that is being used to serve them. Take their parliament, take their national assembly, for example. People who are there were elected by them, and they are supposedly there to serve them. They are supposedly there to speak a language that they can understand to be able to evaluate whether or not they are representing them properly. So it means that for 60 years, we have been fooling our people. We pretend that they elect people to represent them, but they are not representing them. Because what they say in the National Assembly, right now, one of the most important sessions is taking place, that's the budget session. But what is being said there, they don't know a thing about. And the 54 or 50, let's say 53 elected members were elected by them to speak for them on their behalf. And the law says, if people empower you to do anything on their behalf, and you are not doing that accordingly, they have power to get rid of you. But they cannot do that. They are even ignorant of the fact that they have power to do that. And that's why they call them Mansa. MPs are Mansa, the president is Mansa, ministers are Mansa. And these are people who are employed by the people to serve them. That's why they pay them. And that's why the law says after 5 years, they must go back and they should take stock of them. Whoever is good, they can still continue to vote for him or her. Whoever is not serving what they think, they should not vote for that person. But that cannot take place in a situation where the language in which everything is done in this country is alien to the people. And we say there is democracy. We say there is participatory democracy. I'm saying these things because it is time we spoke the truth. And I'm saying this deliberately to provoke you. So that when you go back, there is no laughter about this. This is the greatest tragedy afflicting the African continent. It is a tragedy that is afflicting even after so-called independence. How many people would have had the chance to come here if we were to speak here in Wolof? Tell me. Every woman would have come. Every interested woman would have come because they are also interested to acquire knowledge, to be informed about what is going on. But we are speaking in a very strange language that means nothing for them, even though what is happening here is so fundamentally important to them. But it's a woman who has created something fantastic. Something that is going to contribute to the promotion of knowledge. Somebody is talking about the writer's books not being bought. Any good book, particularly the one that we are talking about tonight, should find its way into the school curriculum. I recommend this book to be part and parcel of books to be used in our school system. Because I've read it more than once. I read some of the poems with tears. Because they spoke exactly, they speak exactly what should be spoken. I say congratulations to you. And I'm 100% sure that you are going to make scintillating progress in what you have started to do. I have no doubt about that. So it is us who are going to read these books. Because, to be frank, there are two types of books. There are some books which are meant for hell, and there are some books which are meant for heaven. And books meant for heaven are the ones who should find themselves in the school system. And those are the books that are worth reading. But some books are not worth reading. It's not every book that is written that is worth reading. I don't know whether you know. I'm not criticizing anybody. I'm just saying a fact. Because I also write, but I write differently. I write technical things, not poetry or not anything like essays and things like that, but they are all technical. My job is to take a poem, that book, for example, the book that we are talking, my job is to take it, dissect it, and say what it is. That is my job. I use meta language to talk about language. So the relevance of culture, African cultures in our school, cannot be overemphasized. There is absolutely the need for that from day one of our independence. The first thing that should have been done is to decolonize the colonial education system. But the colonial system is still being reinforced to the detriment of the development of our own languages, with the exception of the efforts, extraordinary efforts made by Harry and others who are making efforts to do something different. And that is why instead of taking a poetry book from another culture, even though this is written in English, but it's tinted with the culture of this country, because the person who has written it is rooted in another culture. And when she writes whatever she writes is also tinted with that culture in a certain sense. So culture's importance culture's importance in our education system cannot be overemphasized. In fact, it is a tragedy that it is not happening. Of all the writers in African continent, of all the writers, they had a meeting in Khartoum in 1958, the African writers. And they decided that their works should be translated into Swahili. No one has done it. But the first president of the Republic of Tanzania, Julius Nyerere, took upon himself and took Shakespeare's book, Merchant of Venice, and translated it into Swahili. One of the writers on the only one I know so far, I'm not saying he's the only one, but the one I know, who has decided to do away with English, and he is one of the most read writers in the world. Whichever book he writes is bought like a hotcake. That is Ngugi wa Thiong'o. He has done away with English years ago. He writes in Swahili and Gikuyu, which is his mother tongue. I don't know any other writer who has decided to stop writing in French or English. I know there are people who are writing in Wolof, there are people who are writing in Pupulde, there are people who are writing in Mandinka and Bambara, but to say I'm not going to write anymore in French or English, Ngugi is the only one I know who has decided to do that years ago. I know him personally because I worked with him in 1980 in London, 80, 81, 82, when the regime at the time in Kenya clammed the door on his face. He couldn't go back. We formed an association called the Committee for the Release of Political Prisoners in Kenya. So I know him personally. So what is necessary to be done? Yes, we can continue to write in English, but we must begin to learn. And I saw some very beautiful lines in the book. I think it's about page 44 or 45 in Wolof, which shows that you can write in Wolof if you want to. All that you need to write, you need to do, and that will just take you a day, is to learn the alphabet. That's all. Once you know the alphabet, you can continue to write. I think each time you write in a particular language, you are promoting that language, you are promoting the culture of that language. There's no doubt about that. Can you imagine if all the African writers had started writing since the beginning of independence on this continent? Then Africa would have been totally different. And that's why China is totally different, even though no one ever colonized them to destroy their language. But South Korea and North Korea, South Korea had the same independence the same year with Ghana. And Ghana is richer, as far as I know, than South Korea. But South Korea is part of the First World War because in terms of development. Ghana is still tottering with development. Why? Because they are using English. For me, that's South Korea does not use English. They use their own language. China, the most populous country in the world, 1/4 of the world population, never uses any language other than Chinese. Has that prevented them from inventing the atomic bomb, the hydrogen bomb, and all the weapons you can imagine in the world? So people, when I started the issue of teaching the languages in 1979 in this country, I had enemies, and most of them were intellectuals. All that they were sort of doing is to attack me physically. They are saying, well, my child already speaks Wolof, my child already speaks Mandinka. Why does he have to lie? The person speaking forgot that the English child was speaking English. But that also stopped him or her from learning English. Speaking language is one thing. To learn is another thing. There are two aspects of language, performance and competence. You can speak it very well. All of you can speak your languages. Your performance is fine, but competence, zero. When I say competence, I'm saying if I give you a sentence now in Wolof, I say analyze it grammatically. Who can do it here? That is competence. But when I say who can speak, all of you will speak. But if I subject any one of you here, and now I'm saying this, not with arrogance, of course, but I know I'm right. If I say, here is $1,000, I want anybody here to speak to me on a technical subject in his or her language for 5 minutes without using English words. You will fail. No one will get my $1,000. And if you want to deny it, I'll just do it right now. So that's the problem. So to conclude, I say that our cultures have been suffering. Well, with the others outside there, not with them, but we who have been to their schools, we who have been to school have had our culture, our values tinted with the culture in whose language we were educated. And that is what should have stopped at the dawn of independence. But it continued under the spurious argument that because of the multiplicity of languages in our countries, it would be better to speak French and English as unifying factor. Can you imagine that? English is unifying who in this country? Those who can speak it. And we are just an infinitesimal fraction of the population who don't speak it. So who is English uniting here? Why don't they go, we politicians, when we go around, why don't we continue to speak to people in English? Tell me. But however difficult it is, everybody tries to speak the language that the people can speak. That is the truth. And that's what we should have gone with at the dawn of independence. We would have been flying up in the skies. We would have had scientists, we would have had mathematicians, we would have had all sorts of people here. The Cubans who come here, doctors, some of them are professors, they speak Spanish. The Egyptians who come here, some of them are professors in their domain. They learned it in Arabic. So it is not impossible for anybody to learn anything using your own language. And that's the spurious argument that some intellectuals hold in this country. And that's not true. I can speak about any matter. I think some of you should know that by now. Those who have been following our speeches on our platforms on politics. I can talk about the Constitution without using a single English word. I can talk about the economy of this country without using an English word or French word. Of course, there are borrowed words in our language. It is not a crime to borrow where it is necessary. All the scientific terms in English are either Greek or Latin. You know that? So what is the problem? You always borrow when you have an item. For example, when this is not created by us, this is not in our culture. We never created this. So when we are taking this, when we are naturalizing this in our language, we either create using the means in our language, or we take the name for it in that particular language and naturalize that language, that word in our language. For example, you say telephone. And Madinka said telephone. You say mobile. No mobile. Small mobile. But that, because we are not the creators, so therefore we have no name for it. We can only borrow the name it has come with and then naturalize that word in our language. Naturalizing it is you make it in tune with the phonetics of your language. That's what we do. So there is no crime. But then to borrow when you don't need to, like you have $1,000 in your pocket And you go to Mr. Joe, you say, Mr. Joe, lend me $1,000. And you have already $1,000 in your pocket. Is that not madness? It is. So you borrow, when you have it, that's a crime. Huh? Like, let me say, currently in Mandinka speakers, particularly Mandinka young girls, when they are speaking now, those who listen to them in Mandinka, they say, "Wole gena beteyata, gena, mo gena ba." That's wall of construction. Wole gena beteyata. You don't need gena in Mandinka because it's already there. And putting it there makes it even tautological. Huh? So that's the type of borrowing I'm talking about. So finally, your languages need to be learned, to be written, and for your information, a new language in policy has been formulated, adopted by the government. All that is waiting for is implementation. And what is the nature of that language policy? When it comes into practice from ECD, that is preschool, the child will learn everything in the mother tongue. From preschool to grade 3, everything the child learns will be in the mother tongue. When I say mother tongue, sometimes it's not true, it's not the mother tongue. Because if you take a child like Mandinka children in, how is it called? No, in Banjul, this near Crab Island, that area, how do they call it again? The area behind Crab Island. Tobacco Road. Most Mandinka children, they speak Wolof and not Mandinka. So it is not, when you say mother tongue, it does not mean much. Wolof is not their mother tongue. Wolof, their mother tongue is Mandinka. But because of the linguistic environment, they all grow up and learn to speak Mandinka. I told them, I was teaching in Kampama school. I know. So they speak Mandinka. So what we say is the child's L1. L1 means the child's language 1, the first language that the child speaks. And probably sometimes it is the same language in the community. So in other words, when the policy is being implemented, when you are teaching Gambian languages in Banjul, Wolof is the one that is going to be taught there because it is the dominant language. But when you go to a place like Gambisara and all those places like URR, the only place you can teach Sarahule is URR. Because that's the only place Sarahule is spoken, apart from 1 or 2 scattered villages in Jaras. So that's going to be the policy. They are preparing because it's a big preparation. You need to train teachers. You need to produce books from ECD level up to grade 3 in every subject area. So that's a huge task. So some progress has been made. So I encourage writers like Harry to think of that also, because in the final analysis, in the not too distant future, Gambian languages are going to be the languages of our education. So I think we should start preparing ourselves for it. And anybody who is capable of writing a good book in Wolof or Pular or Mandinka or Sarahule, before the implementation of the policy, you are sure to have your book bought. You are talking about buying books. Anybody who can write in Wolof now, and you give me to edit it for you, be sure that your book will be bought, because when we start implementing the supplementary readers, particularly stories, you see, we have lost all those things. We have lost all our values in stories. Nobody is talking about storytelling anymore because your languages have no value for writing. That's what it's about. Thank you very much.